Thank you for having me here. My name is Brother Duli. I have to give foundation first and foremost to my parents. That's where it all started, and that's where my first teachers came from. Mama and Papa, you know. In the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, they say that we pick our parents. They say we pick our parents, we pick the conditions and the life lessons that we may learn during this lifetime. So, in my opinion, I picked the most perfect parents for this life. Both my parents were way ahead of their time. I grew up in the inner city of Roxbury in Boston, Massachusetts. And my father immersed us deep into mysticism as a young boy coming up. You know, he taught us about Eastern philosophy, had us doing yoga, had us doing Tai Chi, Qigong, all these different things, bringing me to the Hare Krishnas, the Sikhs, you name it. Both of my parents were seekers of truth, of what they considered their path of truth. So I had a very interesting upbringing. My mother, she was considered schizophrenic, you know? And I tell people all the time, my mom was like a living saint. I've never in my life, and I'm not saying this because I'm her son, you know? I'm saying this because of observing from my own eyes what came out of my mother's mouth. And the things that she brought to this world, you know? My mom would do things like she would take a bus, maybe $5, just anywhere, and see how God would take her back home safe and sound. She would like to experiment with life and see how life would teach her. Life was her teacher. And when we was young, she would teach me things like how to speak to trees, how to speak to nature. She would say, son, which tree is talking to you right now? And I would feel the energy, and I would study nature. And I said, that one, Mom, that's the one that's talking to me. She said, you're correct, son, correct. But it's interesting when we look at schizophrenia and what these labels that we consider bipolar. Somebody talked about bipolarism earlier, and schizophrenia and things of these nature. These were, in a lot of ways, the modern medicine men and modern medicine women back then. Because they could see certain things that so-called everyday people couldn't see. And because you have Western psychology and science and different things, and because they don't know about that we live in various dimensions, they say, oh, that person's crazy. But this person could see this one Uncle so-and-so who died or whatever walking right in your room and different things like that. But it was very scary growing up sometimes with my mom, because my mom could channel. She used to channel straight from the source. But then there was times where she would channel certain negative things as well, the lower dimensional beings. And I would see her eyes change as a little boy. And it would be scary because I was like, oh, who's talking to Mom now? You know? But that was a foundation for me to get interested in healing, because I seen some of the suffering that my mother went through. As brilliant and as beautiful as she was, I wanted to see, she lived in a time, maybe if she lived in a time, she would be one of these high priestesses. But she lived in a time, like my father, he would always tell me, we live in cycles. In Hinduism, they would call this the Kali Yuga, the age of iron, the age of discord, the time where human beings are at their lowest. So maybe if my mother lived during the golden age, she would have been a priestess or uprooted for who she truly is. But because we live in such a dense time, people like her are very misunderstood. So that was one reason, in a lot of ways, of me having an interest in healing, spirituality. Now, even though I had these two beautiful parents growing up, that did not take away the environment that I lived in. Because around the corner was two warring projects going at it. And as beautiful as these lessons were given to me as a youngster, it was different walking outside my door. In the 80s, as we know, what was going through America was the crack era. So I had a lot of friends where their parents were addicted to crack. A lot of friends that were selling crack, you know? And it put a little goosebumps on me because we time travel even with our memory, you know? And the level of gang activity that was going on in my neighborhood was ridiculous. So I came from this foundation, but I would leave my home and I would see my homie or this one over here just trying to survive. Something that's just going across America, this crack epidemic. So a lot of the lessons I learned, I threw away because I was dealing with survival. You know what I mean? And from that place, I met a lot of people, a lot of pimps, a lot of killers, a lot of people, and I could have gone in a very wrong direction, but through the grace of Great Spirit, they always let me go in deep, but not too deep. You know what I mean? So it wasn't until this OG from the community, who I had a lot of respect for, his name was Killer Man. He told me, he's like, yo man, and these were the gods. This is what we call the gods. You had the 5 percenters, the nations of gods on earth. I used to roll with the Nuwabians. Some of my brothers who were dealing with more science temple. This was a lot of black, esoteric, occult knowledge that was going on in their neighborhoods. And I remember this OG from the neighborhood's like, yo man, I wanted to take you to this brother, this Vietnam vet that teaches Tai Chi and Qigong. So I ended up going, and it changed my life. That was my foundation right there. Because my father, he tried to teach me Tai Chi and all that. We would go to Malcolm X Park, do the forums, but the kids would teach, like, oh, you think you're Bruce Lee? Wow, all this other stuff. So, you know, I'm trying to fit in with the homies, you know? But when I seen one of the OGs really into it, I was like, I gotta check this out, because I got a lot of respect for these dudes. My first teacher, which his name was Master Heath Robinson, who was a Vietnam vet, he was on the verge of once almost committing suicide, because we had Chief Nighthawk, we had Sincere, some of these brothers here that were military men, and they could tell you about post-traumatic stress disorder. So one day my teacher he came with a 38, he was gonna blow his brains out. And he seen this old Chinese man doing the Tai Chi form, and he stopped him in his tracks. And long story short, this man took him to China, he became a monk, and he came back to the hood and started teaching us. So when I started getting into Tai Chi and Qigong, it tamed me. Because like a lot of us here, you might see, oh, well, we look like we all well-to-do. Some of us have backgrounds, you know what I mean? And it tamed the inner fire in me. And I remember one night, I was just crying in my homeboy's car. The tears was just coming down my face. And I didn't know why I was crying for, you know? Because this Tai Chi Qigong was changing something in me. A lot of the unconscious trauma and things were coming to the surface. And I did not know how to articulate. I did not know what was going on with me. And I remember tears were coming down my face. And we were smoking a blunt. And the OG was like, it's all right, man, it's all right to cry, dude. I was like, word? He said, yeah, I cried too. I said, really? You know, because especially coming in an incarnation as a male during this lifetime, because I'll talk about past lives and things that I've seen. Coming into this incarnation as a male, especially in this Western world, we're taught to put up this whole persona, this whole thing, in a lot of ways for protection. To say, okay, I'm gonna put this whole thing around me. You know, I'm not gonna show any feelings or vulnerability. And that's killing people. Tears are healing. You know? So that meant a lot for me to hear this from this OG, to say, yeah, man, it's okay to cry, man. You know? That was this foundation that started for me. And from there, things start happening. I got a job at a metaphysical bookstore. It was called Unicorn Books. It was one of my best jobs I ever had, because during that time, I was in my early 20s, and I was exposed to so many different paths in this thing called spirituality. I was meeting book authors and people were and then that was the first time I learned about Reiki, you know? And I started getting into hands-on healing. And I was like, wow, I understand this concept. I know about this life force through the Tai Chi and the Qigong. This is deep. So again, it became another opening for me to start working more on myself. Eventually, I went into college. I got a scholarship because I'm an artist as well, and I'm a true lover of hip hop. So a lot of my homies, we would always get up with the graffiti. So I was gifted with the art, and I got a scholarship to college. And at that time, it was very awkward for me. I actually dropped out. I had to go back, but it was very awkward for me because I was coming from the hood and coming into this educational place, and I didn't really fit in with anyone, you know? Some of the black folk there were too bougie for me. And then it was the white folk, they ain't want to do. Then I was like, man, I don't fit nowhere in this motherfucker. And then I was working at the liquor store at that time, you know, and the guys that worked there, they were straight murderers. You know what I mean? They were talking about, we had to put this dude in the bag because he was dealing with messing up our drug trade, whatever, you know what I mean? So I was seeing so many things that I was like, man, this college is like a bubble world, man. Y'all don't even know what's going on around here. And I remember I dropped out and I went and I got a job working with these elders. And it was at this daycare center, and it was a man there, I believe his name was Mr. Jackson. And he told me about one time how his cousin got lynched. You know, and they put snakes in this little pit thing while he was being hanged, you know? And they had to cut him down in the morning and all that. And I remember he talked to me and he said, man, go back to school. He said, you still got that scholarship? I said, I don't know. He said, go back to school, man. And I went back to school. And at that time, that's when I got introduced to the mushrooms. Now at this time, I had this young lady, this young sister. She liked me. She was feeling me, you know. You know, and you know, I don't know. Seemed like a regular dude, but you know, I guess I get that attention sometimes. But yeah, but anyway, she's this white girl, right? You know, I'm not, you know. I wasn't really into interracial dating and stuff like that, but I got love for everybody. That's always been me, you know? But she's like, Duli, you gotta try these mushrooms. It was my birthday. I was like, mushrooms? What you talking about? You know what I mean? In the hood, we just smoke some weed, maybe get a little drink on, have some Henny, whatever. You know what I mean? I don't know about this motherfucking mushroom shit. You know what I mean? So she's like, no, it's natural. You know, it's, organic, you know? So I'm like, I check in with myself and I'm like, okay. I was like, okay, you know, I do like mushrooms, you know, I put them joints on pizza, you know. Occasionally I might throw them joints up in pasta and shit, you know what I mean? So I was like, what the hell, why not? You know what I mean? Take these mushrooms, we at the party, we drinking on top of that, smoking, everything. Next thing I know, I see my homeboy looking at this painting, right? It was one of my main homies. He took the mushrooms for the first time too. So he's just into it. So I'm like, his name is Antho. I was like, yo, Ant, man, you all right, man? He's like, yeah. He's like, yo, by the way, don't look over there. I was like, what you mean? He's like, yo, shh, that dude over there, he don't got no eyes. I was like, oh, shit. Oh, I was good the whole time before he started saying that shit. So I'm like, really? So I'm like, man, you go investigate and see if he got. I was like, dude, he do got eyes, but yeah, he started getting me nervous. You know what I mean? Next thing I know, I'm sitting down, I'm trying to calm myself down. I got these Orisha beads on, you know what I mean? Next thing, you know, joints start moving by themselves. I was like, oh shit, what the fuck is going on here? And then, on top of that, I felt like there was a UFO above the building. You know what I mean? I don't know why, but I was like, they're here. You know what I mean? Listen, y'all. Listen. That's where the paranoia came in. You know what I mean? So I'm like, yo, I'm out. You know what I mean? My other homeboy, he didn't take it, but he was peeping my body language. He's like, yo, I'm out. He's like, yo, dude, what's the matter? He's like, yo, let me take you home, bro. You're acting strange. He's like, and then I thought he was in cahoots with the aliens. So, you know what I mean? So I was like, no. I already know the whole game here. You're not having me go in your car. I know you're gonna take me to the aliens. Ain't going down like that tonight. Eventually they got me into the car. You know what I mean? The aliens didn't get me that night, but you know what I mean? But that was my first intro, it was 5 grams. And I was just, you know what I mean? I was going in. But it was me being me. I was intrigued because I was like, you know what? I don't like, you know, some fears came up. So I was like, yo, I want to explore that. I want to do this by myself and see what goes on with this, right? I remember I did it by myself. And I'll never forget. I remember it felt like my Kundalini energy came through and just went through my spine and just popped out my head. And I heard some, it was like drumming, like celestial drumming, like a celebration from the ancestors. And I remember it was middle of the winter, all this heat went through my body. I remember I took off my jacket, took off everything. I wear glasses, so I could see better. And next thing I know, I'm giving praise to God, walking down the street like, thank you, Dad, you know what I mean? And this lady sees me, and she's with her husband. And she's like, he needs a psychologist. Right? But everything was new at that moment. My saliva, I felt like I tasted it for the first time. I seen this tree. The tree, I knew it was a female tree. It looked like a big yoni there. I went in there, I was like, yes, Goddess, thank you. Hey, you know what I mean? And I was like, wow. And I remember I got back, that's when I was at college. I got back home in my dorm, and I was just crying tears of joy because I was like, man, they'll never believe this. They'll never believe that this is possible. You know what I mean? And my life was changed after that. I was like, you know what? I got to learn more about this. And then after that, things just started coming through, you know? I started hearing about ayahuasca, other things, and I didn't have the money to go to these places, but it seems like I just, through my love of wanting to learn about it, these things started to come to me. So my first ayahuasca experience was maybe about 11, 12 years ago. And it was this Peruvian shaman, and it was just beautiful. What can I say? It was just beyond words. First time I had rapé, all those things, even Kambo, all these things just started coming and coming and coming. And it was changing my life. Fast forward. Psychic surgery. I didn't know I had the capacity to do this type of healing until I started seeing some of my past lives. And then that's when I started to see that this thing that we call death, we don't die. We take these earth suits off or whatever suits off, and then we continue the journey of where we left off. I started to do this chanting thing around the hood. And I said to myself, man, what am I even saying, yo? Am I speaking gibberish? What the fuck is this shit coming out of me? And I'll never forget, this was around the time I first met Baba Kilindi. This had to be about 7 years ago or so. And people started to hear about me, and I got invited to this college, to speak at this college at UMass Amherst. And I met Baba there. And I remember Hank Rising son, the night before I went there, he's like, you gotta check out this guy, Baba Kilindi. And I was blown away. I listened to all these lectures by him that same night, and I was blown away. I was like, who is this man, right? When I did my talk, I remember Baba Kilindi came out afterwards and shook my hand and said, I really liked your talk. You know how you got the deep, I really liked your talk. I was like, really? From the OG? I was like, man, word, man, thank you. you know? And I remember it was this guy that was in the crowd, and he asked me after my talk, he's like, can you do one of these chants that you talk about? I was like, really? I kind of do this thing when I'm in a trance or semi-trance, but I'll try. So I mustered up, get in a trance and start singing. And he says, do you know what you're saying? I was like, no. He's like, you're speaking ancient Mayan language. I'm like, oh shit, really? Now this guy would go back and forth to Mexico and sit in traditional mushroom ceremonies. So he recognized some of the words that from these chants that in songs that they would sing over there that were coming out of my song. So I was like, wow. So at that point, it was something big for me because I was like, wow, I'm really tapping into something. All right? Now, fast forward. I remember I was working with one sister, and I was teaching a Kambo class. I went to Costa Rica. Again, all these opportunities started happening. I went to Costa Rica to learn how to sit with Kambo and how to teach it. So I'm teaching this class on Kambo, and it was one woman at the end, everybody was leaving to go back home, and this woman, she actually had a late flight the next day, and she said, Duli, can you do a healing on me? She's like, I have these big lump things on my feet. She said she's been to the doctor, they can't do anything for her. For the past 8 years, this was tormenting her, okay? So I said, okay, I'll give it a try, see what's going on. I ate some mushrooms, started to get in the zone, and it was like this intuitive part of me just knew what to do. And I seen out of my hands like lasers that would go into the infected area, and it would go in, and in my mind's eye, I would see it go in. It would go in like somebody throw like a pebble. So it would go in, and it would expand out, go in again, expand out, go in again. And next thing I know, I open my eyes, the lump was gone. I was like, oh my God, this stuff really works. So I started doing it on the other foot. It started dissolving. At that point, my energy started to lower. I didn't have as much energy at that moment. And I started feeling the sickness of whatever she was going through. So at that point, she said, please stop, Duli. I could see that, you can't do any more right now. We could do this another day. This is before I started to learn about transmutation. First time I learned about transmutation is when I was in Mexico. I was in Oaxaca. That's when I started to learn about snake venom. I got an opportunity to sit with my wonderful friend, Acacia Lewis, who's, I think, supposed to be speaking tomorrow. She had her divine alchemy class. And I was there to learn some things about herbal medicine from her. And she introduced me to her snake venom teacher. I was blown away. I'm gonna go back to the healing, the transmutation thing. Sometimes I jump here and there, so bear with me. I was blown away by the snake venom, I was having a hard time breathing because I was high in the mountains. In the high altitude, I couldn't really breathe so well. So he gave me the Monaco Cobra, which is a neurotoxin that deals with cleaning out the heart, cleaning out the lungs, and it works on your brain. The very next day, those same mountains, I was having a hard time walking up out of breath, walking up those mountains like it was nothing. I was like, oh my God, this stuff really works. And then I remember when I went back home, this inner, I don't know, it was like all the chatter. Sometimes people was like, your mind is going 1,000 thoughts per second. The inner chatter ceased. And it was like that for almost 6 months. It was like I was in a constant state of meditation. like in the form of samadhi. I was like, man, this stuff is amazing. I was like, I must learn this and bring this back to our people. Fast forward, I got a chance to go back to Mexico, and I asked the gentleman, please, can you teach me? And I don't know what he's seen in me, but he said, yes, I'm going to teach you. And I've been studying and practicing with snake venom ever since. And just like Sincere was talking about the snake venom as well, it's a very, very powerful medicine. The testimonies off the food chain. I just got one that deals with AIDS that I got food the other day, you know? So we got ones from cancer, all, you name it, you know? But the most popular one I get with a lot of clients are dealing with mental health, because we live in a society that is upside down. We're taught through the so-called educational system that you go to school to become part of the work system, rather than learning why are you here, why did your soul even incarnate here? What is your purpose here? So the most thing I get from most people is dealing with mental health. Because I go to Brooklyn every Wednesday and Thursday, and trust me, I'm very empathic. So getting on the train and seeing people in the hustle and bustle, we don't supposed to live like that. You know? So mental health. So back to the psychic healing, surgery. That same teacher that was teaching me snake venom. Duli, 2 minutes. Gotcha. He had something going on with his lip, and he was like in extreme pain. And I said, you know what, I might be able to help you, but I have to be in a very deep trance to be able to help you with this. And he gave me some DMT. And he's a good alchemist. He makes real good DMT that day. So I remember I smoked it, and the first thing that happened is I turned into this Mayan god. Seen the feathers and everything, started going into the chant. And then when I smoked it again, I started doing some mudra type of stuff and opened up a portal. The portal was complete darkness, and I had to go through that portal with no fear or attachment. And at the end of that portal looked like a demonic, so-called Baphomet figure. Going through that with no fear or attachment was like an initiation within itself. Because when I came back from that experience, that's when I was taught about transmutation. Being able to turn something so-called negative into something positive and useful. Because before then, do a healing on somebody, maybe take that negative spirit off a person or something, maybe, and there's different ways that, I'm sorry I don't have enough time to go into the details of these things, but it would go into sometimes putting that spirit into the earth, sometimes bringing it into the sun, doing certain things of that nature. This was the first time they were shown to me on the other side a certain breathing technique and a certain way to be able to pull in the negative energy. It looked like a boiling pot. We know in Qigong, we know the Dansen area. In a certain way to breathe, in a certain way to hold it, where that negative energy became as a source of energy for myself, which was a game changer for me. Ever since that time, I've had all kinds of experiences doing psychic surgery, where people that were, you can name it mental illness, you can name it exorcisms, you can name it even this one person that really, this brother that really, I'll never forget this session, he had this spontaneous movements that were happening, and it became dangerous for him at one point, to the point that he could be driving his car or whatever, and he wouldn't know when that would happen. The doctors didn't know what to do with him, okay? I remember when I was working with him, I seen this negative entity, this spirit, leave from out the top of his head. It was a smoky type of being and went out my window. He hasn't had that problem since. So I learned so much on the other side. It's like a school. Literally, sometimes I go into this dimensional place, which I call the universal operating room. It's amazing. You know, it's amazing. But I will leave this with you. We are here to make change. We are here to heal. And we are here as the mystics throughout whatever tradition that you prescribe to know thyself. That's what this is about. And you will keep coming until you know thyself. And I'm gonna just leave you one thing real quick, if I get a moment. I spoke to one of Baba Kilindi's good friends, Peter Andreas. He was the first man that gave Baba Kilindi mushrooms. I spoke to him the other day, and we had a great conversation. And what he was talking about, somebody brought up people living very long. Peter Andreas knows this particular monk who's over 300 years old. Okay? I remember him and Baba Kilindi has a friend who he was doing a particular standing meditation, and they both seen a beam of light come over him. That man has not aged since 1976. Okay? There's a lot to us that we are not aware of. And my father taught me this from a very young age. He told me, son, once you master your mind and your heart, you can do anything. You could walk through walls, you could levitate, you could do all these things. He says that we live in a very dark age where we think that's supernatural, where it's a part of your essence. It's part of your DNA. It's part of your birthright. You just have to learn how to remember it. Okay? This is the first time I did a talk on fasting. I'm not Muslim, but some of my family are. So I wanted to give thanks to Ramadan. So I haven't ate or drunk any water. So I was like, this is going to be good. Let's see how this turns out. But yes, thank you for listening.